one common criticism to the bias approach is that at some point you have to choose a prior probability, and that's a subjective choice that any of you will probably do a little bit different, yeah, and it will affect the result of your posterior probability. So you can say, okay, that's bad because then it's a subjective result and we like objective results. But on the other hand, if you have expert knowledge, it's reasonable to factor that in your result. If you know more about some event, you should get to a different result than somebody who knows less. Yeah. What I did here is I plot here, this is the uniform prior probability in our supernova example. So that's just same probability for all possible cases. And the green line, which you might not be able to see very well in the back, is a peaked prior. So here I assume that we have some knowledge that the prior probability is somewhere around mu, a value of mu. And I estimate this with a Gaussian or normal distribution. And then for the black curve here is the result that we computed earlier with the blue prior probability, and the red one is the result if you do the same exercise for the green curve as prior. What you see is that it becomes, the posterior probability becomes more peaked, which is reasonable because we already assumed some peak behavior. And if we have some prior probability, some knowledge that deviates from the frequency that we observed, yeah, then this affects the posterior probability also. And here you can also then play around how these integrals are affected depending on your choice of prior. But what you also see is that the effect is visible, but not necessarily dramatic. And we also saw earlier that when we started with a uniform prior for 4 supernovae and then used the result as a prior for the case of 5 supernovae, that it affected the outcome, but it didn't look completely different, even though the prior that we now used was significantly different in shape. Okay. Okay, so it turns out that if we start with a different prior but repeat this process, the final effects are usually not too big.